resources are empowered intentionally.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. September is National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, as well as Hispanic Heritage Month. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I am your host, U.S. Army retired Colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon T. Arnold. Our panelists today are a very distinguished group of people. I've looked at their bios. I was mentioning to Dr. Landreth earlier that I would take an hour to explain everyone's role and what they've been doing with their lives, and that would sort of preclude our show. But Dr. Ed Landreth is a Chief Mental Health Officer for Veterans Integrated Services Network 12. Michelle Langlois is a Suicide Prevention Program Coordinator at the Jesse Brown VA, which I'm very familiar with, an excellent institution. They're doing great work over there. And Dr. Laura Trakhtman, a Suicide Prevention Program Lead in the VA Great Lakes Healthcare Network System, Veteran Integrated Services Network 12. Today, we're going to have a discussion about the Jesse Brown VA Suicide Prevention Program and VISN, VISN Division 12, Healthcare Integrated Network Services. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you. And I'm really honored and pleased to have you on the show. As I mentioned earlier, this is National Suicide Prevention Month. And our service members are still, unfortunately, entangled in this network of despair that brings them to the point of terminating their own lives. But not only do they terminate their own lives, but they terminate the input of a great person for their families and for our nation. They've served and deserve much, much more. So I'm so honored, and I'm really pleased that the three of you have dedicated your lives to helping to save our veterans. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to go down the list as they listed as I introduced you, but I'm going to give you each 2 to 3 minutes to talk about what your perspective is on veteran suicide prevention. Why is it so important, and why should we be paying more attention? So, Dr. Landreth, we'll start off with you.
Oh, thank you so much. And first, thank you for the honor to be guests on your show. I know you reach a large network of veterans and veterans' families, and as well as community providers and others out there in the community who all have the same goal in mind, and that is ending veteran death by suicide. This is we're in a crisis. Veteran death by suicide is the number one priority at VA, and it's the number one priority at Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. It's a tragedy. It's catastrophic. It affects not only the veteran and the veteran's family directly, but many other people. So one veteran death by suicide just has a reverberating effect throughout the community. And so again, we've made it our highest priority to put a lot of different systems in place, different opportunities for the veterans to get the help that they need. And again, it's something that we hope that we can bring an end to sometime soon. Thank you.
And Michelle, what is your perspective on this issue?
Well, my perspective is that suicide is preventable. That's something that people don't always think. They feel like sometimes there's nothing I can do about it. And actually, it's quite preventable. And I think that because of stigma, a lot of times people aren't talking about it. They don't understand it. They don't know what to look for. And so it's really important, at least on the clinical perspective role that I have and my team role has, in order to and get our veterans what they need to kind of help when their crisis escalates, so we can decrease their risk and promote community or other kinds of protective factors to keep them safe, educate people in the community, educate our providers. So thankful that you have us on here to educate your viewers, because there's a lot we can do in order to reduce veteran suicide if we continue that conversation and continue to target not only our veteran population, but educate people in the community and their family members. And so for me, this is something that we absolutely can tackle. Letting people know that this is preventable. There's lots of resources the VA has, and there's lots of resources the community has, and we're partnering with them in order to work together to reduce veteran suicide.
Licensed clinical social worker. It's near and dear to my heart. My mother was a social worker from the time she was in college until she was 91. She passed away from a massive stroke. But 2 weeks before she passed away, she was knocking on people's doors to make sure they were taking their medications. So she was a lifelong social worker. And so the work that you do is invaluable to our service members and to our communities. So, but Dr. Trakhtman, how do you feel about this?
Both of my colleagues talked about suicide is preventable, and it takes the VA and the community coming together to really partner in the public health approach, where we recognize that majority of veterans are not seen in our healthcare systems, and we have established relationships with our community partners that I hope to highlight a little bit later, where we really try to engage veterans and their families and their communities in preventing veteran death by suicide. And I'd like to say that, we grew up in the VA. I did my clinical practice in the VA, and then I became a VA psychologist. It's been many years. And this is truly the first time in the past 15, 16 years where VA has stepped out of their role as just a healthcare provider and really embraced the importance of these relationships in partnerships with the community and other governmental agencies. This is a really exciting time for us.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so Dr. Landreth, what do you think are the major problems that our veterans are confronting right now? Is it, access to care, or is it that this is not being recognized for what it should be? The resource allocations for it. What do you think are the greatest challenges you face in taking care of our veterans?
Thank you. That is a very good question, and I'm very happy that you asked that question. Veterans, we know that veterans are at higher risk for death by suicide than the general population. The National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report came out for 2023, and it shows that veterans are around 71.8% higher than non-veteran adults to die by suicide. And this, again, is just a very serious problem. That's an understatement. One veteran death by suicide is too many. So you mentioned access, and we talk about resources. And so the VA has put so much into trying to end this problem. We've taken, like my colleague just mentioned, we've taken now a community health approach, because we realized that we cannot manage this alone. We need to partner with the community. We need everyone's help. It's all of our problem when it comes to ending this veteran death by suicide. There are many things that can lead to veterans wanting to take their own lives, and stress, such as divorce or job loss, health problems, loneliness, substance abuse, housing problems. It's very complex. It's a complex problem, and that's what makes it very difficult. And so again, we're committed to this public health approach, And access, I was lucky enough to be, I'm a member of a subcommittee on access, and this is at the national level. And I was just in Washington meeting with some of the highest members of the VA team, and it's about access, being able to get those veterans in for the care that they need when they need it, and so. I think we've improved quite a bit over the years, but we still have a little we have a little work to do, and so it's again a priority of ours to make sure that we have the resources, the programming, and we have the ability to allow open access to veterans to get the care they need.
Well, there are some things that as talking about Dr. Trakhtman, I think I pronounced your name correctly. I was wondering, there are so many different situations that arise, and I was wondering if you could tell me about one of the success stories, because I know there are many of how you guided a veteran, on the right road, and to bring them out of this state of depression, because people don't realize it's not just an individual suicide, but it's also the loss for those people who were there, um, soldiers in on combat arms, or people who were part of their Marine group or their Navy group or the Air Force group that were deeply affected by their death as well, and their families, their spouse, their children. This is really a devastating impact. It's not just an individual that's out there by themselves, and even their coworkers, when they're seeking employment, those kinds of things. So, do you have any success stories that we can have? I wanted to show that you can actually pull yourself out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, where do we start? I've talked about having this public health approach where we work with, other government agencies. We work with our governor, and through the governor's challenge to really engage individuals in these important conversations. But on a personal level, we both, all three of us see veterans in our daily lives, in our clinics. And we were lucky enough to be able to bring in a cutting edge evidence-based treatment program to our network that is available to veterans in all 8 healthcare systems that we cover, where we do a group in this kind of format, in the video format, where veterans come together and learn skills to manage their suicidal thinking. And at the end, we've been doing this actually today. We kind of talked about it. We've been providing this evidence-based treatment for the past couple of years, and get to check in with veterans, how they're doing at the end of the treatment. I am so lucky and blessed to say that we have not lost the veterans since we've started this group, and in fact, we get extremely positive results from veterans saying. One in particular veteran talked about how he woke up feeling in crisis and was able to use the skills that we taught him to manage his suicidal crisis, and joined the group and really engaged his peers in important conversations about kind of health and asking for help and looking at it as a strength. And I think kind of the bigger combination for the VA, we rolled out our campaign to save veteran lives for suicide prevention. And we have veterans that talk about their struggles with suicidality and engaging their partners in these conversations and really getting over the stigma of asking for help. And I think it is just such an important conversation, whether or not it occurs in the therapy session, behind the closed doors, or if it's occurring as a national campaign for the VA, where we really engage the right stakeholders in these conversations and share success stories. I didn't particularly prepare a success story for today, but this was the first one that came to mind, as we were one of the first in the nation to pilot this program, and are just so grateful to have such wonderful results.
Fantastic. I love that. That's such a huge success story. Because I really care about veterans, of course. I was in combat and saw a lot of people, go through quite a bit of emotional and physical trauma. But going to Michelle, Michelle, I know this is a campaign season, but I see a campaign behind you about dialing 988. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. Then I'm going to ask you a question.
The 988. As you can probably see behind me, I'm in the way, but it's Veteran Crisis Line. About 2 years ago, it switched from an 800 number, the whole country did, to 988. And this was so that it would be easier for anybody in the country with a mental health crisis to call, just like we would do for 911 for a medical concern. For veterans, they would press 1 to get to the veteran side. The national line is managed by SAMHSA, and our line, the Veterans Crisis Line, is managed by responders from the VA. They're very well trained. They manage the crisis at hand at the time people call in. And people for the Veterans Crisis Line can call in for any kind of crisis. There's a misconception sometimes from our veterans that they have to be suicidal to call. But we really want people to call when the crisis starts so that we can address that crisis, get people the resources and the support and the care they need so that it doesn't escalate to suicide. So that surprises a lot of veterans. So it is a crisis line for all kinds of crises. The really interesting thing that we do that's different than SAMHSA is that if a veteran calls the crisis line, they offer to have a follow-up call from the suicide prevention team, which would be my team. And then we would call the veteran back, provide additional resources and support. And even if the veteran isn't eligible for VA healthcare, it doesn't matter. My team still has to make sure that we get them the resources and the referrals to whatever it is they need to address their crisis. So it's a really, really good wraparound system that people don't really know all the details about kind of how the Veterans Crisis Line works. The one other concern people have sometimes, if I call the Veterans Crisis Line, they're going to send police or EMS to my home. And if you look at the data, the VA, the Veterans Crisis Line, very rarely does that. The only times they would do that is if the veteran asks to have EMS sent to their home, which does happen actually quite a bit, or they just can't maintain safety. They're going to be a danger to self, and we have to make sure that they're safe and they're okay. And that's still very rare. So majority of the folks who do call, EMS never gets involved. So anybody listening, I hope that kind of maybe relieve some of those fears. It's a really wonderful resource. And if you're worried about a veteran, you can call with a veteran if it's your buddy. We have a lot of people will call on behalf of a veteran they're concerned of as well, even if you're not in crisis. So it's a resource not just for veterans, but for families and friends of veterans and also active duty military.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, because the question I had for you as well, my mother, as mentioned before, she's a social worker. So if I said, well, the person has a mental health problem, she'll say, so they don't have a body? And then I'd say, well, they have a physical problem. Well, they don't have a mind, So she always brought those two together, saying that it's a whole person. So even though we're talking about, mental health issues, sometimes people have disabilities as well, or have been, scarred by war. So from a sociological standpoint, what are some of the special challenges that you see with people who do have disabilities or are facing those kinds of medical issues that are impacting their mental health? And then I'll move to Laura and Edward on that question as well.
We do know that some of the risk factors that can lead to veteran suicide can be physical limitations due to kind of chronic or severe health issues. So as people start having more deterioration in their health as they age, we can see that sometimes the suicide risk can increase. Pain is a big issue. A lot of veterans really struggle with pain. And so that can definitely be a pretty big risk factor. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing these concerns for our veterans, their health needs. If there's a disability, what can we do in order to kind of get them to have better functioning? Is it working with prosthetics, being more mobile? Veterans who get, their electric wheelchairs, and that's like a life changer for some of these folks. Getting, again, their pain managed. Also doing education with our medical staff to understand that a lot of folks that they're working with, these can lead to thoughts of suicide, so they can look at the whole person and understand more holistically that treating their health is also treating their medical needs. And I just did actually a training today at University of Illinois, training their medical residents actually earlier today. So, kind of making sure that not just mental health providers are aware, like you said, it's the whole body. We have to make sure that everybody treating the whole body is aware of these risk factors and the needs to treat the whole person.
Okay, Laura, what's your perspective on this?
Well, I suppose I'll piggyback on what Michelle was saying. We, at the network, we kind of take a bigger approach, and our jobs is to examine every death by suicide that occurred in our medical centers. And based on that, we adjust our treatment direction for our network. And so that occurs every year, and it's an important process by which we really do boots on the ground improvement in real time with kind of looking at what's occurring in our medical centers and then changing our clinical direction. Every veteran now gets screened for suicide when they come into our medical centers at the minimum once a year, but usually if there's a cause, we always use evidence-based tools in screening them, regardless of where they're being seen. So, thinking of the mind-body approach, right? There's so many veterans that are never seen by mental health providers. And VA had recognized the importance of engaging these veterans wherever they're at, audiology, optometry, wherever they're seen within our medical centers, we ensure that we screen and ask the questions, them, their loved ones, whoever they're with. So it's an important part of what we do in the VA, that level of engagement. And of course, if someone is in crisis, then we have ways to help them manage the crisis with our mental health providers or not. For example, this September during Suicide Prevention Month, we've partnered with our other networks, so the entire Midwest. And our goal this year is to retrain and re-engage all of our providers, within our Midwestern states, so Illinois, Wisconsin, and we just go down the list, where we're bringing them for kind of training, weekly training on cultural awareness of suicide prevention. And we kind of this constant retraining and re-engagement of providers outside of mental health so that they know what to look for, they know how to ask the questions, they feel comfortable having these conversations.
We have about 4 minutes to go, and it's a time that always goes fast. They're telling me 2 minutes, but we're going to try to get a little bit more. So Ed, you can go ahead and give us a brief kind of hit on this particular issue.
Yeah, my colleagues answered the question very well. Through our analysis that we do every year, we know that veterans who are older and veterans who have chronic health problems are at high risk for suicidal thoughts and attempts. So we've done a lot of different things, as Dr. Trakhtman mentioned, but also we're looking at embedding providers in the specialty clinics outside of mental health to be able to assist those clinics and those clinicians and those veterans, for example, who come into the pain clinic with chronic pain, or veterans who are even in primary care. We have what is called primary care mental health integration, where we have clinicians there ready to assist those primary care docs if they become concerned, or if the suicide screening is positive, then we can act immediately or as quickly as possible to treat those veterans.
All three of you, this has been enlightening. I'm not sure if you know, we broadcast into 19 countries. We actually have global, reach throughout the country here. Many of the VA facilities and a lot of things in the Department of Defense, the VA system, and Department of Labor also hear our program. But we're going to have you back, all three of you. I actually have a few more questions I should have gotten to, but believe me, there is a lot more that we can talk about. So we will be reaching out to the three of you to come back on. But thank you again, Michelle, Laura, and Ed. You all three have provided our veterans with an invaluable resource and their families, our community, and our nation. So again, I applaud you all for what you do. Stay with us. Stay with us. We're going to move on to another segment, and we're going to talk about the need for a national infrastructure bank.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312.
Hello, hello. Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. September is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. Make sure that you reach out to veterans who are in trouble and make sure that you support them. And also, this is Hispanic Heritage Month. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, and I am your host, U.S. Army retired Colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon T. Arnold. Today, I have a distinguished panel. It's Congressman Danny K. Davis, the Honorable Illinois 7th Congressional District Congressman and America's Heroes Group Advisory Board member. And we also have Elpheka McTardy, is a professional macroeconomist, former senior economist, International Monetary Fund. She's also chief economic advisor for the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. I was able to hear the talks that would be given at the DNC, and I'm sure they've done this across the board with different groups, but they are a group that's dedicated to what I think is a genius plan, a genius viewpoint on how to build our infrastructure. And I'm just amazed at the information that I received during that meeting. So the discussion is that the Illinois 7th Congressional District Congressman Danny Davis, NIB, National Infrastructure Bank, Coalition 5 trillion bank agenda to fund U.S. infrastructure. And Congressman Davis said he'd be running just a few minutes late. He may have some important things to do, like voting on things for our country. But I'm going to start with Elpheka. Why don't you give us an overview? And welcome to America's Heroes Group. But I was really blown away by yourself and the presenters at the who were talking about the NIB and why it's so important for us to be supporting this as people in this country. This is a fantastic idea. So why don't you just give us an overview of what this whole initiative is involving?
Great. Thank you very much for having us. We're really very honored to be with your radio audience today. So as you pointed out, I am a macroeconomist. That means I look at the big picture of what's happening with the economy. And I used to I worked for 25 years at the International Monetary Fund. When I retired, I thought maybe it would be a good idea to really apply my skills to seeing if I could help with an American policy that would help the American economy and American workers. And this really is it. Congressman Davis has introduced a bill in Congress to create a $5 trillion public bank to lend for infrastructure projects all around the country. Well, why do we need one of those? Because we just cannot adequately finance infrastructure either through the federal budget, the state and local budgets, private capital money. We have money being spent by those different entities, but it's not enough. I'll show you some examples in just a minute. But the idea is this bank will complement budgets, top up all the financing that we need, invest in our economy, invest in our country, fix our bridges, replace all of the lead water service lines, for example, in Illinois, which has the second largest number in the country, fix our roads, build high-speed rail, build much, much more affordable housing, and really restructure the American workforce so that we have much better paying jobs for families that can, enable them to actually pay their bills. And it's not a new idea. It's been done many times before in our nation's history. The banks aren't around anymore because their charters timed out. But other countries around the world use our model, and they call it the American system, and they have permanent banks in place to finance their infrastructure.
Phenomenal. Yes. And I was wondering, the relationship between this and we had an act that passed, and I think it really blew by the media in a very, in a way that wasn't really focused upon as important a bill as it was an act. But the Inflation Reduction Act, it was August 16th of 2022 when it passed, and it was signed in November. Brought into the this international agenda in overseas. I'm wondering what that has to do with the National Infrastructure Bank, it seems like it makes it even more important that we have something like an NIB
Right.
with that in place.
Well, just to go to show you how this evolved over time, when President Biden first came into office, he promoted the Build Back Better plan, which would have done climate change things, would have fixed infrastructure, would have done a whole host of things, and put it in to the, at a budget request of $3.5 trillion. Well, when senators thought about this large price tag, they couldn't agree on how they were going to pay for it. They didn't want to raise taxes. They didn't want to deficit spend. So they made the thing get smaller and smaller and smaller. They broke it into 3 bills: the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the climate part; the CHIPS bill, which is intended to stimulate electronics and manufacturing, that kind of thing; and then the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was really a reauthorization of an investment spending that the government reauthorizes every 5 years. But altogether, all of those things were small. When you see that, when you compare our need, which is $5 trillion, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, that tracks 16 of the categories the NIB covers. And also, we add on, the other things that the NIB added on, like housing and high-speed rail. When you compare that to the Inflation Reduction Act, it's only 1/10 of all the money that we need. So the idea is that this would be a big complement to federal spending and also to state and local spending that can't afford to pay for the infrastructure either.
Yes, and one of the things that we're facing now too is also the issue, because you brought it up as one of those 3 arms of the Inflation Reduction Act, was the issue about global warming, and that is really having a tremendous impact on our infrastructure. And we already have an infrastructure that's failing us. Actually was looking at some news reports where some of the signage, actually the poles were falling down in the city. They had been corroded through, and they'd actually passed inspection prior to their falling. So, and we have the bridges that are failing right now. We're seeing all kinds of infrastructure issues.
Right, and climate change is making it worse. So we had a big backlog of bridges that needed to be fixed, and were not paid for through the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But now we have the climate change impact, and it could be anything from extreme heat causing the bridges to buckle or get locked in their place, or even crumble, according to a new report that came out in the New York Times just yesterday, saying that a lot of these bridges could die prematurely because of extreme heat. Or we have extreme flooding that's eating away at the foundations of the bridge. Or we could have things like they weren't made resilient from a big super tanker striking them, as happened with the bridge in Baltimore Harbor.
Yes. And actually I was speaking to a friend of mine today, and it was really interesting conversation, but we were talking about, there were some things where we had some military people who were actually working on systems, but they were younger. So when they started to see transistors, they said, "What are those things?" They don't. So there's really a big need for education, right? In order for us to be able to engage in this kind of process. So is that part of the plan for the NIB, or how does
Absolutely, because I do a monthly newsletter, and I call it the Economy and Infrastructure Roundup, because the two things are related to each other. As goes infrastructure, so goes our economy. If we don't invest in our infrastructure, our economy grows more slowly. We run into things like big traffic jams or supply chain problems going through ports or whatever. So the two are definitely related to each other. And the bottom line is that this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs, this National Infrastructure Bank Act, will provide enough funding to not only fix all of the infrastructure, but actually move the needle on the economy, on the American economy. So it'll create 25 million new great paying jobs, family sustaining wage jobs. We want to restructure the labor market so that we have people moving into these out of low paid service jobs and into these better paying technical jobs to repair our infrastructure. We'll be able to really fundamentally raise GDP growth rates which will bring in new revenues to government, solve our debt problem. And we cannot do all of this through the budget, which has been the traditional approach of Congress. We really need a side bank, an off-budget bank to cover all of these big projects.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. And I was wondering, as far as the involvement of the average citizen in this process, what should we be doing to make sure that the government listens to this? And then there's a second one that I was going to ask you another question is, so I'm going to start with that question, and then I'm going to ask a second question.
Okay, sure. So our coalition is actually a grassroots campaign. We are low budget, don't get money from anybody. We're all volunteers, and we have looped in to help us a lot of state legislators who know what their infrastructure needs are that are not being met through their budgets and are very attuned to things that need to be fixed and are causing big problems. New York is flooding. California and New York don't have affordable housing. Our energy grid is really running dry because of excess demand, because of excess heat causing, needing more air conditioning, because of new data centers. All these things are happening. The need is great. And so this is an educational program, thrust of the coalition, but it is also an opportunity for anybody to have a voice in formulating federal policy. And how that they can do that is they can go to our website, nibcoalition.com. They can sign up to receive the latest news and events that we're hosting. We usually do a monthly Zoom call nationwide. They can approach their members of Congress and ask them to sign on the bill. Tell them about traffic in my area is just terrible. My plumber, my school teacher can't afford to live here near their place of work. We need to have this bill, and it won't cost the federal government a dime. That's the beauty of it. And we have flyers on the website that you can take to your congressman whenever they have a town hall meeting, and you can bring up the subject and ask them to sign on the bill.
That's phenomenal. And historically, I learned a little bit about the history of it. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. I think this is the fourth time this has been done, but maybe
the very first person who engineered the first bank of the United States was Alexander Hamilton in conjunction with our first president, George Washington. They recognized that they needed to build America because we had just won the American Revolution, but we were devastated with debt from having fought, the revolution, and we had no industrial base at all. We were just an agricultural economy. So he wanted to use this bank to start our industrial revolution, and built centers in Paterson, New Jersey to start manufacturing. It extended through the second generation under Monroe and John Quincy Adams. They built the canal system. That was our first transportation system before we even had roads. Abraham Lincoln adopted he wanted to have a third bank, but this niggly Civil War came along, and he had also a financial crisis. So instead, he adopted our first national banking system, employed the same method of getting the bank started, and built the Transcontinental Railroad. And the fourth iteration was the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, started by Republican Herbert Hoover, picked up by FDR, used to get us out of the Great Depression, used to build up our military and finance big projects to win World War II, and lifted up the whole economy. The afterglow of all that investment was a 20-year period of high growth rate and really a moving of a big segment of our population into the middle class on account of this investment in our economy.
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase Albert Einstein. He used to say, doing something that gives you a bad result over and over again, expecting a different result is a bad idea. But it sounds like doing something that's good over and over again, expecting a good result is probably a good idea.
Correct. And this would be a big compliment to our federal policy. There's no other policy that I can think of that will reverse income inequality, will double GDP growth, will solve our debt problem by bringing in more revenues. It makes money for government. And without that, our economy will go backwards and we will decline. And the example of comparison is what the Chinese did with such development banks. They had 3 of them. They used it to build 27,000 miles of high-speed rail, build new, beautiful train stations, build a whole water grid across their country. We're running out of water. We don't do something, we won't have food in our grocery stores. That's how serious it's becoming, because the drought is in food-growing areas, and we really need to pay attention to all of that. There's no money in the budget right now for that.
Yeah, that is such an important point. I remember with the American Public Health Association, actually gave a presentation with some of my colleagues, and it was talking about the water wars, and how those wars are going on in our southern states right now, Nevada, and they're fighting over water because that's really a critical issue.
Yes.
And it's really basic survival.
We have $400 billion in the bank, the National Infrastructure Bank, dedicated just to water supply, in addition to all the rest of the $800 billion for water infrastructure like sewage and drinking water. And what our aim is to really see if we can boost up supplies in the South, the dry Southwest. It's a little bit of a break right now. They had rainfall last year, but the Colorado River, the whole system is still declining, and we could lose power and water to 7 states that supply those things to 40 million. That 1/3 of all residents in the Southwest benefit from that Colorado River system, which is running dry.
So that includes homes, schools, hospitals, clinics.
Everything.
So it's a public health issue. At heart. That we have to respond to this. And one of the things is that members also can actually write their congressional members, right, or contact them saying that this is something that you need to do.
Correct. Just there's a phone number on the NIB Coalition website where you can email your congressman. The bill number is HR 4052 to distinguish it from other proposals in Congress. And ask them to sign on and give them real examples in your area of things that you need, like less traffic and more affordable housing, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's really critically important, and we just don't pay enough attention to our economy, and people, just don't really pay attention to their finances many times. And I know you're looking at it at a macroeconomic level, but even at a micro level, people have to realize you need to be involved in this process and know that you're part of the bigger picture too, that
Correct.
You're actually doing things that can affect your outcome and how things are going. But so the bill HR 4052 is something that people should be writing into the congressional members about to support this initiative. And I know that Congressman Davis was like the chief sponsor, I think, of the bill itself. But he has many people who are aligning in with him in the congressional level as well, bipartisan, knowing that.
Well, we don't have Republicans yet, but we're actively seeking them. And we've talked to at least 150 Republicans about the needs in their district. Everybody, up until now, infrastructure had always been a bipartisan issue. But the question is, with big budget deficits and sort of fights over what's going to be in the next budget, this has kind of fallen off the table as far as being, part of their, what they're paying attention to. But there's huge scope. Every member of Congress is very attuned to listening to their constituents. If you get enough of them talking to the same member, that's how we were able to bring on all of the 40 members that are on co-sponsors of the bill so far.
Yeah, and one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about the success that China's had with those 3, banks, it provided jobs, it provided training and education, because you can't put a high-speed rail together if you don't have trained workers.
Right.
And that's something that we're sort of falling behind in the world. So as it's an issue of national security, it's an issue of national solvency, and our sovereignty as well. And
there's a big role for veterans to play in this too. There are programs around like helmets to hard hats, where we want to retrain, veterans in these great paying skilled jobs. These are, some of them use the latest technologies, new water systems, putting up a new and enhancing an electric grid so that it can accept renewable energy coming off of new generation plants, and also provide it to areas that are fast growing or have lots of data centers. These are really on the cusp of things that if we can't keep the lights on, it's going to not be well. It's not going to go well for us.
Yes, and one of the things you just brought up that was really interesting is that we also now are talking about infrastructure hardening. Making sure that as we're rebuilding, we have the right technology, we have the right skill level, and then we have the right fiscal backing to make sure that it's
Correct.
implemented correctly.
Yes.
And so that's really very important issue. We actually had someone on the last show that was from the Department of Labor, and he was talking about veteran jobs and the program that they have, and it was really a very, very good thing. But I can see the intersection of this, and also with the educational system, that we have to realize that we cannot no longer go without training people on the basic requirements. We have artificial intelligence out here now. We have all kinds of technologies coming out, and if we're not training our citizens to be able to command those jobs, and bring some of those jobs back home, we need the infrastructure for that.
And a lot of this infrastructure is quite complicated to develop, especially when you have older cities with very old infrastructure and you have to do a lot of drilling and things like that. If you want to watch a documentary on one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen was the construction of the Crossrail in London that cost $20 billion, but it's like building in a jumbo jet in the air while it's flying. It was really quite amazing technology just to roll something out like that. And we want our workforce to be able to, and our construction companies to be able to do the same.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we have about 4 minutes to go. What I was going to ask you is to actually give your website again in a way that people can actually tune into what you're doing. I think this is one of the most critical meetings I've ever gone to in the last several years, because I feel like this is such an issue that is so germane to our survival and to making sure that we come out of this the right way. So if you can, just give us the
Sure. As it's the website is nibcoalition.com. You can sign up to receive our information. We have lots of videos explaining how the bank works and how it would specifically promote projects that are needed in specific areas. We have flyers on there, lots of materials that you can use to talk to your congressman about it and learn more about, infrastructure in your area. We really want to expand our promotion for this bill and this bank. So this is kind of like all citizens on deck. This is really something that you can contribute to influencing your national policy to build something that will better all Americans and every single jurisdiction.
Yes. And by the way, they can get involved with it by getting to your website. I told you I'm all in on this. So I'm going to be following what you're doing. We'll hope to have you back on multiple times in the future. But in the short term, Bill HR 4052 is something that everyone needs to know about. They need to know about the National Infrastructure Bank and what its proposal is to Congress, and to write your congressional members. You can write congressional members even if they're in your district. I have Republican and Democratic, you know, and say, this is something that we need to do. Come to the table in a bipartisan way, and let's get this done. We have to save our nation. We're talking about saving democracy now. We need to save our nation's infrastructure, and make sure it's viable for generations to come. But I'll give you the last couple minutes. Anything you want to drive home I know Congressman Davis is probably still working on the infrastructure bill in D.C. right now. I can't believe he'd be busy right about now with all the campaigning going on and the presidential campaign.
And the next budget that's upcoming, which is already going to be a difficult, slog again.
But yeah, tell us a little bit more. That's a last minute kind of thing about what you think we should be doing as a nation, and what's your vision?
So my vision is really to make it an even playing field for all Americans. We need to reboost our middle class. We need to help our poor. We need to solve our debt problem. And we could do all of that with this bank, which is big enough to fix everything, invest in our economy, and really help the American worker to be much better off with a great paying job.
Well, it sounds like this National Infrastructure Bank Coalition has an incredible macroeconomist who is leading that discussion. And I am so happy because when I was talking to them, they said she must come on so, for the show. But we will have you back on again with Congressman Davis. I know he's always very busy doing things for the community and for the nation. So, and as you are. So thank you very, very, very much for securing our nation and making sure veterans have a future and their families.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and we're going to stay with us. We have someone coming up, Dr. Kenneth Campbell, which I think you will really enjoy his conversation and what he has to talk about the role in global society.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and
Hello, America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. September is National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and also Hispanic Heritage Month. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I am your host, U.S. Army retired colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon T. Arnold. I have a very special panelist with me today. He actually, Dr. Kenneth Campbell, DBE, MPH, MBA, MA, and I think if he gets any more alphabets in his behind his name, he'll have the entire 26 letters covered at some point. But his title is that he is a former executive assistant to the director of the Illinois Department of Public Health and an adjunct professor at Malcolm X City Colleges. He also is a Marine Corps veteran times 6 years. And all I had to do at that point is say Semper Fi and say it in the correct way. And he was an E4 financial records clerk during the Gulf War, Operations Desert Storm and Desert Shield. But he also received his MBA and MPH from the Benedictine University and received his MA and doctorate degrees from Loyola University. In addition, he attended the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, where he received executive leadership training and certification. Dr. Campbell is someone I've known for some time. He is a stellar individual and is someone that you need to know. But he has done many things in the background for preventing the disease spread in in our city, in our state, and actually affecting all the states around us, so our nation, with the COVID-19 response. So he was working tirelessly around the clock. I can tell because he was calling me at 2:00 in the morning. I said, Ken, what are you still doing awake? And he was still out there working hard. But, I have Ken coming on today, and there is an organization that actually I started back on August 8th of 2023 because I saw this lack of educational access for people who are in the African diaspora. So this organization, the African Diaspora Association of Public Health Professionals, LLC. But its mission is to advocate for and unify African diaspora public health professionals regarding STEAM education, AI usage, employment, and healthcare support systems ownership. And part of the problems that we have in our nation now is that we don't advocate for the education of people in general. So we have people who are across the spectrum from the veterans po- uh, population that are from the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, who are in impoverished communities. So it's not just uniquely an African diaspora issue, but in order for us to have a unified nation and one that is built on strength, so we can stop all of this things that are going on with the violence, with the miseducation and misinformation about the culture mix that we have in this country, we need to highlight some of the achievements and some of the things that were done in order uh, to safeguard our nation. But from the perspective of emergency preparedness in particular, we had things that happened down in the Gulf region, Louisiana, with Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Actually took about 600 soldiers down there to respond to that, and it was devastating in impoverished communities, and it was particularly um, uh, devastating in those communities of color that were there. But everyone who was affected by it is a human, is a person that's part of this nation that we should be protecting. But I wanted to talk to Dr. Campbell for his views on things like global warming, like infrastructure rebuilding, and the need for us to be pushing for people to become educated. I know he's at Malcolm X College. Um, that was a predominantly African American institution, but you had people from all nationalities, all from men and women. But I wanted him to speak to why is it so important for us to start learning about this infrastructure, the AI technologies, the need to be more engaged in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and to be more involved in the healthcare support systems ownership to make sure that we have representation in those systems in order to strengthen our nation. So maybe you can give us a perspective on what you see as the landscape and some of the challenges for getting involved in uh, the infrastructure and into the technology realm and the educational realm, and how that overlay is so important for us for community engagement, those sorts of things.
Well, one of the things I think, Dr. Arnold, is that, and I know we touched on a little bit about emergency preparedness. And so when we look at disasters, disasters impact people and communities differently. Uh, and communities of color, as well as the underserved communities, disaster worsen inequities already present in society. And so when we begin to look at the many unique challenges and factors that stem from social determinants of health that goes unchecked before these emergencies arise, it really creates a huge problem when you try to tackle the social determinants of health and all of these other issues like misinformation and mistrust and distrust, which is a lot of this, as we saw during COVID-19. We really saw a lot of this in COVID-19. And so now that you added in the unchecked social determinants of health, the unique needs of minority communities, the underserved, the starve of resources that occur many times over, along with the barriers, then any kind of emergency in itself is like pouring gasoline on a fire. I mean, it just explodes. And so, as a result, what we need to be doing, and I really believe it is a governmental issue, because this issue is not just isolated and in silos in one state or one community or one city, but it's huge and it's very impactful. So I think when you begin to look at a lot of these issues, I consider uh, emergency issues in the United States. We have to look at it from a more of a huge governmental issue coming in and trying to help us resolve these issues. Now, many would say, well, the government didn't do the best job for COVID-19. Understood. But when we have now with new technology like AI, we have access and opportunities to explore areas that we just could not have done before and really bring communities of color together and provide resources. I think the days are gone for us to have all of these conversations. We need now to move global as well as domestic resources into these communities to help deal with a lot of these social determinants of health that is really plaguing our community. So anytime a crisis come along or emergency uh, issue comes along, then it's almost again it's like pouring gasoline on the fire. We know the problem is there, but it's hard to do that from a community or individual level. You got to have the help of the federal government.
Yes, yes. And, first of all, I should have said Simplify when you first came on. And, Hua for me, but Simplify for you. But, I was wondering, you dealt with people from all the branches of the service when you were doing emergency response work in Illinois. And what do you think? Because when I raised my hand, to take this oath to the country, it was for every individual in this country, irrespective of their race, their religion, their gender. I don't care. I'm here to protect everybody.
That's
And
right.
so what is the role that we should be looking towards, and what do you think veterans should be getting involved in? Because many veterans are looking for, jobs, and they're looking at. We had someone on last week about from the Department of Labor, an assistant secretary who was over the veterans' jobs and those kinds of things. But how can veterans become more involved in this issue? I think there's a dire need there because of the training, because of the dedication and coordination that veterans have for them to be involved in this whole process.
Well, I think it's like you said, we raised our hands and we fought
Mhm.
for the peace of this country so that we can have a country to come home to protect Americans on American soil. And so it's a hard thing to ask now veterans who are soldiers who are veterans to continue to fight in this process, but we have to get involved. If we don't get involved, we're
Mhm.
not going to be at the table, and we have to be at the table. So
Yes.
there's a couple of things we need to do. One, I think veterans need to get involved at a political level. I think we should, definitely communicate with our local politicians, our state, our federal, because they can provide the support we need, but also get involved with organizations that are doing the things that veterans need to have done. None of these things are done in silo. And so if there's a fire in one cubicle of the office, that fire can spread. So I think that all veterans, no matter what color we are, nationality we come from, we are all veterans and we need to, uh, you know, come together and really begin to become part of the solution because we can. We can. We have a lot of great politicians, elected officials who are doing a lot of great things for veterans, and we need to reach out to them and reach out to organizations that are really trying to change the landscape for not just veterans, but for their families, for their dependents. And so I think we have to be very proactive as veterans. I know it's a lot to ask after you have fought from the country and you may have a disability, but our voices cannot remain silent. We have to become part of the process and be at the table.
Yes, I, totally agree with that. That's something that I've heard echoed by, the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and also by the American Legion as well. That we are still community members and we have a role to play in society still. And, Maurice Bridges, who's the current VFW commander for the state of Illinois, it really echoes that, that we are veterans who are still have a purpose in life. As I was actually earlier, I was talking about this is suicide National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and there are many veterans who have lost their focus on some things about how important they are, and I'm sure that plays into it a bit. But having a purpose in life is really important for them to see that they are still of value and still important to us. So we had many at the VA, psychologists and social workers on earlier, and psychiatrists that say that we have a significance, we have a role to play in the network of society. So what was your experience, working with veterans and other people who are not veterans who are part of your emergency response teams? I know you have things that are going on, like EMACs that are going on, and all kinds of, other things going on. The Emergency Management Agency, IEMA, also is very intimately involved, as well as the Illinois Department of Public Health, which you are part of. So, what was some of the things that you saw as challenges in dealing with community members in a disaster situation? Because we don't really look at COVID-19 as a disaster situation, but it most assuredly was. We have a tendency to think only of bombs and buildings falling down as being, a disaster. But if you're interrupting supply chain lines and people are sick and you're overrunning your hospitals, that's a disaster. So, what is your experience, and what did you see, and where can we get better at making sure that people have inroads to care that they need, and also able to instruct them on being more resilient?
Well, one of the things I'm proud to say for Illinois, we had a great leader in Governor Pritzker. And I
Mhm,
can tell you that the Department of Public Health really stepped up.
mhm,
Did a fabulous job. They really rise above the occasion during this pandemic. And it gave me the energy as a veteran that we can do this. I think that a lot of veterans played heroic roles in getting out and helping us with a number of our vaccination sites, getting the word out, really penetrating into hard to reach communities. I think the thing that I think the pandemic really showed where we at in terms of how crippling our communities of color is, how minorities are right
mhm,
now. They've been suffering 1 through 18 COVID 18 for a long time. And so, with this, again, when you pour this kind of gasoline on the fire, it only explodes and get worse. So, I think that, again, the government agencies from IEMA, the IDPH, Governor's Office, did a fantastic job. The Illinois National Guard, um, and really veterans did a fantastic job and getting to hard to reach communities during times where there was no blue book.
mhm,
And what we needed was the state to really step up. And I think the citizens did a fabulous job. Um,
mhm,
and I think we had a lot of coming together moments that really changed the trajectory of the COVID 19. We did have deaths, and that's the sad part about it.
mhm,
But as a state, we really stepped up and did a good job on that. Um, but it did leave minority communities at a disadvantage in a post COVID 19. A lot of the relationships that we connected, we have to make sure that those relationships are nourished, are have the resources in order for those relationships to grow, to mature. So if something does happen, we have that relationship. And I say we, I'm talking about government, I'm talking about public health, I'm talking about organizations that really need to be in the community. The faith-based community did a fantastic job as well. um, we
mhm,
did mega church vaccinations and testing all over Illinois. And so the faith based community played a huge role in helping us with vaccination and testing. So I think that overall, um, we have to get all of these stakeholders continually be connected and in the communities, not just in crisis, but when things are going well. But these communities need resources. At the end of the day, that's what they need back. And that could be from policy, that can be building trust again, that could be removing the administrative roadblocks during emergency crises. so that these minorities can and people can just get what they need regardless of what community it is. They can just get through the bureaucracy and get the resources that they need in order to rebuild.
Yes, yes, and it's really important, I think, to the things that you stressed, and Governor Pritzker and Deputy Governor Juliana Stratton, they were really instrumental in making sure we secured and safeguarded people in our state. Many lives were saved by the efforts of the CDC, even though they were getting a bad rep. They did things that actually interceded, that saved and protected lives. And so I am really glad to have you on. I'm going to be bringing you back again, of course, Dr. Campbell. You know, all I can say is the Marine never goes away. They'll be part of my my group for life. But thank you so much for your insights. And we're going to be talking about a lot of historical things coming up on this particular segment. And so I'm really looking forward to having you as part of that in the future. But I want you to stay here, We have an incredible panelist coming up, Fred Schulte. He is a senior correspondent for KFF Health News. So stay with us, stay with us. He will be on next.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 31. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. September is National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and also it is Hispanic Heritage Month. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I am your host, U.S. Army retired colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon T. Arnold. Today we have a really special guest. Fred Schulte is a senior correspondent for KFF Health News. And Fred's KFF Health News article, Feds Killed Plan to Curb Medicare Advantage Overbilling After Industry Opposition, is a must read. Everyone should be paying attention to what he's saying. This is a critical article regarding Medicare and what has happened because of the feds killing this. So I'm going to let Fred Schulte explain and set the groundwork for it, and then we can have a discussion about some of the implications of what he's found. Hi, Fred. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How you doing?
Good, good.
Good. Good to hear.
Good. So maybe you can give us an overview, a little bit of an idea of the article, and then also people need to be reading this. How can they reach out to your article and make sure they connect with that source?
Well, the article it's run in a number of different places, but you can find it on our website. That's kffhealthnews.org. And what this article was about, it was about the Medicare Advantage program. There are two ways you can get on Medicare. You can get the standard traditional Medicare, and then you can get Medicare Advantage. Now, the traditional Medicare plan, it doesn't cover a lot of stuff. So a lot of people have to then get a supplemental insurance policy to cover the holes that are in the original Medicare. So it's become much more popular in the last few years, and now is over half the people on Medicare have chosen to enroll in these insurance plans that are run mainly by big companies, private insurers, and they provide all of your health care services, and it can be a lot less money out of pocket. The trade-off that you get is that you have to go to the doctors that they want to send you to, and they may restrict, in other words, the doctors that you can see. But these are huge insurance companies, and they've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, like I said, over 33 million Americans on Medicare are enrolled in them, and that's given them a lot of political clout to get what they want. And what they want is, they're mostly for-profit companies, and they want to continue to make good profits. So what this article was about was the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in Washington, D.C., which runs the entire Medicare and Medicaid programs, and they had become concerned that some of these health plans were, doing things that were raising profits that were improper, like they were finding things wrong with you that weren't actually wrong with you. They go and look in a chart and they'd say, well, you got diabetes, and they put down that, well, it's got complications when it didn't have complications. See, under the pay that they do for these plans, they pay you more if it has complications. So what the government was seeing is that these coding that they use to pay these plans, it's developed into a formula they call a risk score. They kept going up and up and up, and it's costing the government more money. So in 2014, they said, well, but they're doing a lot of these chart reviews, they call them, where they're going back in and mining all this data and finding all these things that are wrong with you that may or may not actually be wrong with you. And it's costing the taxpayers a lot of money. And what they were doing was, when they would go through and conduct these audits, they only look for things that would cost them more money. Cost the government more money and make more money for them. And they ignored things where they'd overbilled to begin with. So in other words, they call it looking two ways in a chart review. So when you do this chart review, you're supposed to do the chart review so that you find the correct amount, not the amount that's in your favor, and ignore it when you got overpaid, right? And the government expects you to find out when you got overpaid and give the money back. And if you got underpaid, they'll pay you more. So they decided to have this regulation, and they decided, well, what we're going to do is we're going to make a regulation here. We're going to put it out in the Federal Register, and it's going to say that if you're going to conduct these kinds of reviews looking for more money, you got to also look for the times when you got overpaid and we want our money back. And oof, man,
wow,
things blew up. So the industry did not like this at all, because apparently a lot of them were doing these, quote, one-way reviews where all they were doing was getting more money and not giving any back. So, after the big blow up, they backed off. So this was January 2014 when they proposed it. And then in May of 2014, they'd had enough of the criticism and they just said, okay, we're not gonna do this. Well, the reason that we wrote the article about that is that this was a matter of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money that and now it's coming and getting new attention because there's a huge Justice Department lawsuit against one of the biggest insurer, I think, in the world, United Healthcare Group, for doing these kinds of reviews like this that got them more money and then not giving back the money that they were overpaid. And so if a lot of other companies are doing this, you're talking about billions and billions of dollars. In the United Healthcare lawsuit, the Justice Department is alleging that they made $7 billion by doing these data mining reviews, and that 2.1 billion of that they shouldn't have gotten. They should have given back. In other words, they took it from the government and they shouldn't have taken it. So just that one company, for a few year period here, you're talking $2 billion. So the reason we wrote about that is that, well, who's running the show here? Is the industry running things, or are the government regulators running things? And it has to be a partnership. Both sides have issues, and they both have opinions and stuff. But ultimately, somebody's got to say, we're not going to allow this.
Yeah. So one of the things that is a kind of a pressure out there now, and maybe you can clarify this for the audience. There's a difference between an insurance company and a health company that is providing care. And sometimes people get those two confused about, is this, an example, Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield versus a Humana versus a healthcare, these kinds of companies. And one of the things that we've been seen as a veteran, at least I've seen, is a little bit of a pressure from those companies you're talking about to become a supplement to TRICARE. And so TRICARE, you already have that coverage, and they are saying, well, this is a better plan. And there's been a push to try to privatize, the VA system and to move it into that kind of arena. And then I'll talk to you about one other, another factor that's coming into play that may be, significant. So do maybe you can talk about the difference between the insurance companies, and those who are providing the care.
Well, many of these, like you said, they're big insurance companies, and then they contract out the care to doctors. So they sign contracts with local doctors groups, so that they don't actually provide the care, but
Right.
they handle all the billing, and the doctors are supposed to, they treat you, and then they send in a report to the health plan, and then the health plan goes to Medicare and says that bills for these services. And where some of the alleged hanky-panky is going on is not with the doctor, but when it gets to the health plan, then the health plan decides, well, that doctor, he didn't write down this, he wrote it down wrong, or he didn't put in this thing and he should have. We're just going to stick it in there and send it into Medicare and get billed for it.
So that's like upcoding.
Upcoding. Essentially, commonly upcoding, or in some cases finding non-existent things. And and so when you do that, then you're vulnerable to the government's vulnerable to getting ripped off. I mean, the taxpayers, getting ripped off, and you read stories all the time about Medicare's going broke, or we don't need to get ripped off. I mean, we need to provide care to people at a proper price, and we're not against anybody making a profit. At all, or we're just saying that that the program has to be run in a sensible way in which taxpayers' dollars are protected, and you just can't let some company run off with money they don't deserve.
Right. Yeah. If I go to a pizza parlor and they say, well, it's $19, but if they came back and said it was $1,900, I think I'd have a different view about what the pizza is. But yeah, so that's really interesting. So what do you think the implications are? So I mean, this actually impacts me as a taxpayer because that means that the taxes may have to increase to meet that kind of demand that's really not a true demand, that it's a false demand that's being imposed on the system.
Right. Well, I think that, critics talk. You mentioned about attempting to privatize the VA, which has of course been a huge political issue for years. But I think maybe some critics think that privatizing the system like this and getting these private companies in brings in a rush to make profits and will drain the taxpayers' coffers. Now, but I mean, I think personally, I would say it doesn't have to be that way. But that's again why we wrote that story, because we're wondering if who's minded the store, if
Right.
get pushed around by. I mean, I understand they're big companies and they don't like it, but you don't. I mean, you got to follow the rules, right?
That's right, right. And one of the other things that's a complicating factor, as I was mentioning earlier, I was going to ask you this particular point. But I used to run the Illinois Department of Public Health back from 2007 to 11, and one of the things that I've been seeing in the public health arena, so the American Public Health Association, American Association of Public Health Physicians, I'm a past president of that. One of the things that we've been looking at is the diminution of people who are actively engaged in the workforce, both doctors and nurses. And there is a feeling that about 20 to 30% of doctors in the next 3 to 5 years will be retiring, about 30 to 40% of nurses. That's going to put a big strain on the system. So you actually have paraprofessionals being trained to do things that traditionally doctors or nurses would do. And I'm not so sure that's a great idea. You have minute clinics flying up, springing up everywhere. And I'm not sure if that's more of a problem for control of a system that's already sounds to be a little bit broken from what you're describing.
Yeah, well, a lot of that stuff comes under the banner of what they call a scope of practice. And
Yes.
if you're an insurance company, you want to hire the people that you can pay the least amount to, and let them do more complicated things. And so, but if they're trained properly to do it, so if you have a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, and it's less expensive than having an MD or a DO, and they're properly supervised, and they're handling relatively minor things, it's fine. I mean, that's a sensible system.
Yeah.
And it's all about balance and just not letting things run amok, and not letting people that aren't properly trained. I mean, who wants to go to whether it's a doctor or a physician's assistant? You want to make sure that person knows what they're doing, right?
Sure. Especially if they pull out the scalpel, you want to make sure they're making the right cuts.
You got that right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think a resolution to this problem would be? Because it sounds like it's still festering in the background, even though you were saying in 2014 they sort of backed off a bit, but it sounds like it's still we still are facing an economic challenge, that there are still things going on in the background, because you hear these reports coming out once in a while that we have a bigger deficit in healthcare spending and that kind of thing.
Well, it's a pretty complicated problem because like a lot of the overbilling, let's say, or overcharging or alleged overcharging, it's not apparent to the patient. Because you don't know anything about this. This is all going on behind the curtain. You're going to the doctor, you're getting treated, you may be happy, you probably are reasonably happy with the treatment you're getting. You don't know what they're sending to Washington to get paid. So you don't see that. So you don't necessarily know that this kind of thing is going on. And so that makes it pretty complicated, because it's not coming out of your wallet. If it's coming directly out of your wallet and you see it, then you really you're going to start screaming about it. But when it's more behind the curtain like this, then it's the taxpayers overall who are footing the bill for this, and the people on Medicare are not necessarily feeling it. And they vote, and and they have a right to petition their representatives, and they do, and they go and they say, well, we don't want this program cut, But some of these other people are saying, well, they're getting paid too much. We need to cut back. And then the healthcare companies say, oh, no, you know, if we're going to drop out. In fact, just today, there's a story that one of the big companies was dropping several 100,000 members because I guess they don't think they're making enough money. So you see, there's a lot of political pressure to bear. And then if the Medicare office in Washington says, you know what, we're going to have to cut that, then they get, you know, 200 or 300 members of Congress, you know, writing an angry letter saying, don't you dare do this, and people with signs, and, you know, whatever. So it becomes a really complex problem. And, you know, originally it was kind of a Republican idea, you know, to privatize this. Let's get let's let the business community knows better than government. So let's let them run it. But it's shifted over the years, and now a lot of lower income people like this, and their representatives and their senators are responding to that and defending Medicare Advantage, even though there are all these groups out there that, you know, that do audits and things that are saying, wow, you know, they're charging too much, and we need to cut them back.
Well, okay, Fred, I'm going to admit that I have my AARP card with all the political action. But you know, I was thinking also, you know, with this, you know, all the people need to be a little bit more engaged in this and making sure that they are keeping an eye on it. You know, right now we're also talking about federal spending for pharmaceuticals, and we have now a cap on insulin. You know, and a cap on, I think 10 other drugs are coming down the pike, you know, to be capped. But the pharmaceutical industry also is an industry that seems to be, you know, charging quite a bit for some of the medications that we have. And what scares me is when people go overseas and they get, you know, something that comes from China that says, take this cowhead pill, you know, and this will cure your diabetes, you know. I just, because I'm a physician myself, so I'm worried about, you know, the implications of people sort of cutting into the market. But this actually seems like a progressive idea, you know, more of a positive idea with saving the government, you know, being able to negotiate prices through Medicare, which we haven't been, you know, really doing that in the past. But what are your thoughts on that, on the pharmaceutical?
Well, I think that they charge too much. I mean, you know, you look at these prices and it's like, are you kidding me? You know, and then it was really galling if you find out you could buy it in France for half that much. And it's the same drug. And then that's a whole kind of another issue if you have, like, it came from a factory where you don't know whether that factory is you know, up to snuff or whether they're being inspected or not. But when you're talking about, like, going over to Canada across the border, you would drive across the border and it's a fraction of what it is, then, you know, the public has a right to say, what's going on here? Why are we getting ripped off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we also have those, you know, the issue, you know, I'm seeing this all the time now. It's the off-label use of medications. You know, some of them have black box warnings. You know, don't use it for this, but many of them don't. And you know, we have things like Ozempic, for example. You know, for weight loss, and you know, there are things that are sort of off-brand label usage, and I'm not sure if that's having, you know, a deeper impact on the federal government as well through a Medicare, you know, programs.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not supposed to, the drug companies are not supposed to advertise a product unless it's approved by the FDA for that use. Yeah. But that doesn't mean they can't sell it. You know, that's exactly right. What's happening with Ozempic and these other drugs. But, you know, sometimes you have a drug, you know, and you take it for one thing, and then you see, all of a sudden you start seeing, wow, look, it works miracles. Like, and I think that kind of happens with Ozempic. You're taking it for diabetes, and you're also noticing, wow, I lost a lot of weight. And the next thing you know, that someone wants to sell it. But I think that, you know, I'm not, like I said, I'm not anti-business or something, but the price of these drugs really are outrageous. And, you know, you look at the people that it might do the most good. If they don't have the dough, then you're out of luck. And it's, you know, you could argue that it really shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and it's kind of a balancing act too, because if you don't, for example, you know, if you have someone that is exposed to COVID-19 and start developing symptoms, you know, you do have, you know, the Paxlovid and that kind of thing that people are taking now and prescribing. and then you also have the issue of being vaccinated, against it, and it actually is a cost savings in the long run. So I think that's why, if you go to a pharmacy, we have now had the flu shot out. We have the COVID-19 updated version of it. There are 3 variants that weren't covered by the prior vaccine.
Mhm.
I think that's a cost savings too to the government, because that stops hospitalizations, unnecessary hospitalizations, ICU admissions, ER visits, those kinds of things. So, what do you think about those kinds of cost savings measures? Should we be looking at those more?
Well, I think, yeah, it's complex. Yeah, if you may be paying money up front to save it down the road, but
Yeah.
it's always a tough thing to figure that out. Whether it's a car,
Yeah.
buy
Yeah.
a car that you got a good price on it, but it breaks down all the time, and so then you got to have all this money in repairs. And so the bottom line, maybe down the road, you would have done better to buy a car that doesn't break down. And it's kind of the same thing. It's very difficult to assess that.
Yes.
But you're right. I mean, obviously, if you are take a thing like a drug like Ozempic, if you're getting rid of massive problems with obesity-related diseases, and maybe it's cheap, that it's 20,000 a year or whatever it is. So yeah, it's really hard to make a decision like that. And I don't think there really is anybody that thinks, and not that it doesn't think like that, but there isn't anybody that really is effectively looking at that kind of thing. I mean, there was a thing that under the Affordable Care Act, there was a thing, PCORI, that was supposed to do comparative effectiveness research, and it was supposed to look at the effectiveness of various treatments and like, what if you do this, what happens, and then be able to tell the entire medical industry, you know what, this is the way you should treat something, and this is the cost-effective way to treat it. But that got all wrapped up in politics, and then before you know it, somebody's yelling about death panels and things and things like that. And so it gets all wrapped. But it's just common sense that that if you're a doctor, you want to know what works.
Yes.
What works, what is cost effective, and your patients can afford. And the bottom line is, people come in sick, you get them better. That's what you want, and you don't want to be fooling around with something that doesn't work. But you don't really know if it doesn't work unless someone does this kind of research. But no one does this kind of research because it's a death panel, So,
Yeah.
it is kind of it's a very complex thing, no question.
So as a person who's a citizen, how can I get more involved in making sure that the system is protected? There's a lot of fraud going on there also outside with people, dipping into people's things through AI and all those kinds of things. But if I get a bill and it doesn't seem right, because somehow, even if they put those things in for the billing cycle, there has to be a record somewhere that
Right.
goes back to your records or your chart or
Right. Well,
So-
you got to start by reading the bill, and then if you don't like it, it doesn't seem right to you, pick up the phone, call with, somebody and complain. And if you think that there's a fraud or something, call the authorities. And yeah, you have to really bird dog these things. I mean, no one's going to do it for you. You have to pay attention, and and it's the same with any kind of consumer bill. If the bill isn't right, then. But I think with healthcare, it's so complicated. When you look at it, first of all, you don't even understand half of the terms. What does that mean? And there's all these codes and all these numbers and things. And the thing is, it ain't that complicated, really. Like the
Right.
numbers. So, but you don't know what they are. So how are you supposed to know what's going on here? But you have to be willing to make an issue out of it and complain about it. If you don't like the price, call up and complain. I mean, years ago, no doctor seemed to ever know how much something cost.
Right.
If you said to the doctor, well, how much is that going to cost me? And I don't know. And I think it's gotten better like that. But I think as consumers, that's how you have to think about your healthcare. It's just like you said, buying a pizza. It's no different, really, in a lot of ways. It's a commodity. You're buying it, you're paying for it, and you want to pay an honest and a fair price for it, and you don't want to get ripped off.
Yeah, Fred, this is a excellent conversation. I I think we can go on for days with this particular topic because as a physician, I remember when I was going through training and residency and all that, they had codes, and I was looking at the codes and it's like, wait a minute, once it goes to the next level for billing, it's a different code. So they were translating the codes into another billing system. And I said, how do I know what you're putting down is correct? And it actually matches that. So there are systems like that within healthcare establishments where the provider, the nurse, the doctor, the PA, the nurse practitioner, they don't know what that actually represents for their patient. And when they send them out, especially if a patient who's on Medicare or dual eligible Medicare, Medicaid, you don't know what they're going to be charged down the road. But I have 1 minute. I want you to do a wrap up, and I want to bring you back on because this is phenomenal what you're doing. I think society owes you a debt for this, for uncovering this. And this story is phenomenal. I've read it. So, but go ahead, Fred, say something, that you think is really pertinent that people need to know.
Well, I think, people need to know, like I was saying, that, healthcare is a commodity like anything else. And don't be put off or scared by the fact that the person's wearing a white coat and has a stethoscope and and talking down to you, and don't be talked down to. Don't let them do that. They have to know that you're the patient and you've got rights and but you also have responsibilities. And your responsibility, I think, is to make sure that, first of all, you get better if you're sick, but also not to allow the system to be drained by crooks and overbillers, and to know that, if it doesn't look right, then just,
don't do it.
say something about it, and complain, and because the thing, if you don't say anything about it, then nothing's ever going to change.
It's that old saying, if you see something, say something.
Yes. Or write it, or put it in writing, or whatever. But I think that's what we do. A lot of stuff with whistleblowers, and there's a strange, thing to do this. It can be a very difficult thing to blow the whistle,
Yes. Yeah.
And because you can be ostracized, and nobody, all of a sudden your friends won't talk to you, and it's not really the same thing with disputing the medical bill, but you got to think a little bit like that. That you're going to be pushed around. You got rights, and
great. Well, thank you, Fred. We're going to go on to another segment, but you have been a wealth of information, and thank you for your articles. Keep doing the good work.
Okay, thank you. It was good to be here. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Take care.
Take care.
Wow.
It's 8 o'clock.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.
Roundtable live stream digital media show. Welcome back. September is National Awareness of Suicide Prevention, and also it's Hispanic Heritage Month. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I'm your host, U.S. Army retired Colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon Arnold. And I have a panelist who's a special panelist. He actually is someone that I met previously, and he's our partner, Steve Romer. He's a U.S. Army Iraq Purple Heart recipient, veteran, and chapter service officer member of Hammond DAV Chapter 17. And he's also a brother from another mother. But he is a phenomenal person that you all should know. He has gone through some trials and tribulations and has succeeded beyond expectations, even of a combat role veteran. He is really tried by fire and came out as golden as you can be. So how are you doing?
Thank you. That was awesome. I love that intro.
So we have the Hammond DAV Chapter 17 updates. And tell us what's going on, Steve. What's going on in your part of the world?
So we just had an event called the DAV Walk, where it's just some of the events that we have, they don't make a lot of money, but what they do is they give a lot of exposure out there to veterans to see that there's organizations out there that want to help them, and getting the name out there and getting the information out there is kind of the important thing. Like your show is so important for that, because a lot of veterans don't know what's out there. The government is a very complicated thing sometimes, so sometimes you need help, and there's organizations out there like the DAV that are willing to help.
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, we had our DAV walk, and it went really good. It was in Cherville in front of the police station. Yeah. And they have a war memorial there where they have soldiers from Vietnam. They have soldiers from World War II. and they had their faces on plaques. And then, so we had a ceremony there, and then just a little tribute to them afterwards.
That is so phenomenal. And one of the encouraging things that you know, I remember we moved away from saying that people were irre, you know irretrievably disabled to enabled. So what are your abilities? And I was looking at the Olympics, and then I watched the Paralympics, and I was like, these people will kick my butt if I was out
Yeah.
there trying to compete with them. So we had to really reevaluate our views of what a disabled person is able to do. Of course, they need to have care. They need to have the resources made available to them, and they need to be covered by the VA, for their disability. But we also need to give them an avenue or a window to walk through so that they can do and express themselves, all their talents, their abilities, their skills. They didn't join the military without those things,
Yeah.
and those things are still with them. So, what are some of the things that that the DAV does to make sure that veterans are, looking at life in a better way?
So one thing that I think the DAV is really good about is, they recognize that not every veteran can be put in a specific group. Like we're not all just soldiers that got blown up. There are a lot of disabilities out there. You could look for World War II. There were a lot of amputations, a lot of shell shock, what they called PTSD back in the day. Vietnam had a lot of the Agent Orange, a lot of the cancers. My generation, we have a lot of PTSD from the Iraq War, a lot of migraines, traumatic brain injury. So and that's just the wars. When I talk to a veteran, I tell them that, it doesn't matter if you were in combat or not. Just being in the military could be traumatic. There's guys that have gotten into accidents on basic training, falling from a wall, or, they were doing a controlled blast and somebody got too close. There's a lot of instances where the military can just be inherently dangerous, just the training alone. So the DAV recognizes that, and we help everybody, whether it was peacetime veteran, whether it was a National Guardsman, we help every veteran. And I think that's kind of the key to it, because, I'll give you an example. So when we file a claim and we have them go to an exam at the VA, we would ask a vet, who do you think is better at rating you, a fellow veteran or a civilian? And first thing they would say is a veteran. And we're like, well, yeah, but that veteran's also been through their own experiences. So sometimes it's better to have a civilian who's outside the purview of the military and can get, objectively rate you. And, that's kind of the part about it. You just want to be able to inform these guys on what's out there and how, you can't just tell them that there's a benefit out there. You got to help them in trying to acquire it as well, because that's the hard part, is when you try to get the benefits. There's a lot of red tape, a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, yeah. And and what do you think is needed? I mean, because what do families need to know about this? Because many times you have veterans who sort of isolate themselves, or don't want to be involved or engage with the system as per
Yeah.
se, but their family members know that they're in trouble. They have PTSD. We know we have the burn pits now with the PAC Act, and people are going through some mental health and physical health issues that maybe are important for
Yeah.
that to be recognized. And so, what is it that we as veterans can do for other veterans, and what do family members need to know about that veteran, and then that how to help them or assist them?
Well, I think a family can really help in helping a veteran to identify that they have an issue. A lot of times we come back from the military and you hurt your knee. It hurts a lot when you walk. You can barely work on it. But life doesn't stop. You have to still pay the bills. So what do? You just limp along and you work the best you can. And what happens is a lot of these veterans, they get used to it and they learn how to live with it. And the family can really help in telling them, maybe you should go in, maybe you should get checked for that. Maybe you should get rated for that. I feel like the family is the key with the suicide awareness, to be honest with you, because a lot of times the family member is the first line of defense. They're the ones that see the veteran on a daily basis and can identify, if there's a change in the veteran's demeanor, if they're isolating themselves, and it's not easy. If you approach, say I have a brother and I approach him and I say, man, I think you're starting to suffer from some things. Maybe you should go in. You're going to get pushback. But if just talk to them and make it known to them, it could be, how do you say, it's kind of planting that seed in their head that, man, maybe I should. I didn't know I had PTSD when I first went. They put that criteria in front of me. I was like, oh, that's what I have. And that was my first time going to the VA. Was after that. I did, you don't even know. You don't even think about it sometimes. So having somebody to show you that or tell you that, it can help a lot sometimes.
Yeah, because if you have a artillery gun go off next to you, and then you just brush off the dust and say, "Oh, is this the dust from the gun?" You're dealing with an unusual situation there, and we have a tendency to sort of brush things off and say, "Oh, that was just a little bit of a thing," and not really understand that this is really impacting us, physically and mentally. And as you were mentioning before, the TBI issues, with improvised explosive devices and rocket propelled grenades, and all those things that were definitely impacting people who are in the combat zone on a daily basis. And then also seeing other members of the military lose their lives, the Gold Star family, veterans that served the country and gave their lives, and you are sitting there watching this happen. It can have a devastating impact, especially if you know them or you worked with them, and you met them on a daily basis, and you were part of the unit for some time. So those things are really something that people really have to understand, the psychological impact of that. And then we have people who are doing multiple tours, doing 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, five. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. I don't think any other war people served as many tours of duty.
Yeah, no. You didn't have guys going back to Vietnam 3 or 4 or 5 times. It's
Right.
And I think part of it was that's part of the PTSD. You come back and they have a hard time adapting to becoming a civilian again. So instead of figuring out how to work that together and figure out how to make it work, they just decide to go back. And then next thing you know, doing another tour and another tour. And, it's sad because, traumatic brain injury has probably always been there. I mean, I guarantee you they had it in Vietnam and World War II. It's just they are barely now accepting that. And when you think about what traumatic brain injury is it's basically just your brain inside your skull. And then when you have a concussion or you hit your head, it shakes inside the skull, and that's what bruises it. And that could be, you can hit your head on a bunk and get TBI. It's got to be hard, but you could still do it. So I think people identifying that now helps. Same thing with suicide awareness. I think it's always been there. It's just people are finally seeing it now and addressing it.
What it is. Yeah. Wow, that's a profound statement too, and an insight. That we have been dealing and living with these things throughout all of the wars we've gone through. Whether it's the Korean War or the Civil War or the Revolutionary War, we've been dealing with combat injuries and the implications for the service members and their families. And so, what website can people go to, or where would you recommend people to get involved with the system if they have a disability or are thinking about it?
Well, you got me on the website one. That's a good one. You got me there. But we, our chapter, we have meetings every month, and our chapter is actually having our meeting tomorrow night in Hammond. It's at 7 p.m. in Hammond. The address is 5820 Holman Avenue. And, we have a veteran service officer from the DAV that works in Chicago. He comes straight from Chicago to go to our meeting to help veterans.
Wow.
And that's, veterans, we take care of each other. That's what I like. That's why I like it. I like to see that because people go out of their way to help other veterans. And it's because we've been there. And the fact that this guy comes to the meetings on his off time right after work. I mean, he's got a family, but he still makes the time to go to the meetings. And, it shows the dedication that these guys have,
Wow.
But we have a meeting tomorrow night. We have a service officer there. It's at 7 p.m. We also have a website. I want to say it's davin17.com, but I'm looking it up right now.
Okay.
But yeah, we have the meeting tomorrow night, and if anybody wants to help with their claim, we'll be there. We also have other meetings throughout the month, so I probably should have gotten a list for you, but I apologize for that. I didn't think of that.
You'll be on again. You know that.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure I have it next time.
But maybe you could just mention them. What kind of things you do. Just in general.
Oh yeah, so we all the DAV meetings in this area have a service officer that goes there. So there's one in Cedar Lake, Indiana. There's a meeting in Valparaiso, Indiana, Michigan City, Indiana. Then in Illinois, there's one in Addison, Illinois. There's one in I can't think of the name of it right now. Oak Brook, I think it's called. There's an Oak Brook in Illinois, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's Oak Brook in Illinois, and I know there's one in Chicago too. That one I'm not familiar with too much, but there's a lot of people in Chicago, so it's too big for me. But
yeah, I'm in Tinley Park now. So I understand the feeling. But no, but one of the things that I was thinking about when you were saying that is how as a veteran or the family members of veterans, how can we support the DAV, the initiative? I mean, talking to our legislative people, congressmen, local legislators, and saying that this is something that's important to us, that we need to support DAV activities as much as we can.
You know what? It's supporting veterans overall, because when you call your congressman, there are bills out there all the time to help veterans. But, the legislators, they all have their own agenda. So, you have to make sure that you get your voice out and show that the people want this as a priority. And one of the things in Indiana they're trying to push is Indiana used to have remission of fees for college for disabled vets. And they did away with it about 10 years ago. And that was a big hit for a lot of veterans. So that's one thing they've been pushing for in Indiana. I know nationally there was a case that was trying to be brought back, or they were trying to bring a case to the Supreme Court where a Army major, I think it was Army major, had back surgery on the military, and they messed up on the surgery, and now he's paralyzed from the chest down.
Wow.
The problem is he can't sue the military. So that case that's they're trying to get before the Supreme Court is to eliminate that law where we cannot sue the military for malpractice. So when you call your congressman, I mean, those are things that you can tell them to help us in the long run. It's the Vietnam vets did a really good job of getting us where we're at, but this new generation, we got to step up and keep it going, because it's kind of like that saying, it's hard to get something, but it's even harder to keep it.
Yeah.
So, we got to stay on top of it.
Yeah, that's really an important point, extremely important point, because my background's I'm an internist, internal medicine, and then also an occupational environmental medicine, occupational health and safety physician as well. And one of the things I do know is that when you were mentioning Agent Orange, there's a thing called a latency period. So if you get exposed to asbestos, you get exposed to tobacco smoke, right? You can develop lung cancer and mesothelioma, those kinds of things. But with the burn pits, we still haven't seen the total unfolding of what's going on with those in the
Yeah.
service members who were in OIF, OEF, right?
Yeah.
Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom. And we haven't seen even the results of those things, those exposures in people who were in the Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm and Operation uh, Desert Storm and Desert Shield at that point in time. So we really need to be more and more involved in this as things unfold, because as they unfold, we need to have the legislation in place to make sure those things are addressed appropriately. And the Vietnam veterans had to wait decades. I mean, many of them, actually passed away before these things actually came into fruition for them and their families.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So,
you're completely right. I mean, it is the VA does a lot of studies. The military does a lot of studies. I mean, the Agent Orange study was like 10 years. What was it? Camp Lejeune, contaminated water. I think they studied that for like 29 years. So they study it. But so from what I understand is what they do is they have these different registries like the burn pit. And what they do is they track you as you're going. So if one guy gets nodules in his lungs, then they look at that category and then they see who else also has gotten nodules in their lungs. Or, for me, for example, before I went to Iraq, I never really had any skin conditions. But ever since I've been back, I get this rash like on the palm of my hand. And I don't know where it comes from. It just comes. And, it's places that you would never. I've had a rash on my knee before. And, where does that even come from? I've never heard of a rash on a knee before. So it's, who knows where it comes from. And that's the thing. Some of this stuff is not explainable yet because they don't know.
Right. Yes. You're absolutely right. And those are the things that we need to be paying attention to, and those things need to be reported in the medical file. So, when when you go in for your medical evaluation, we need to make sure that those things that we say are appearing in documentation. And it's not just
Yeah.
off the cuff conversation with a physician or a provider in the VA system. They need to be actually documented when we say them, so
Yeah.
that they become part of the chart. And then also, one of the things that I think was a shortcoming when we look at overseas deployments was the LODs, line of duty statements. Those were not completed.
Yeah.
In any
Yeah.
shape or fashion that they should have been for people who are actually contending with upper respiratory tract infections or recurrent sinus infections, those kinds of things, and exposures. So, but what are some of the things that you are hoping for, from the DAV perspective, as far as things that you think, a vision for the future of what you think would be um, something that would be justice for the veterans who are coming back with disabilities. I've seen people in really terrible situations where it was, the one person that always comes back to mind, this brings tears in my eyes every time I think about it, but it's a veteran who lost both of his lower extremities and his right arm. He was a farmer down in Southern Illinois, and his wife is working 3 or 4 jobs to try to keep the family together. And I'm like, this guy, if you're not thinking about suicide prevention, you better be down there talking to him and
Yeah.
and working with those situations. But Tammy Duckworth is a very strong individual, but she went through a tremendous loss with when she was being resuscitated after helicopter incident. But so those are the people. We need more people in the legislature, first of all, who are veterans. I'm not going to even start with that one. But
I agree.
we have another show to do on that. Me and you. So
Yeah, right.
but yeah, we have 1 more minute left.
So
every time we get together, the time goes like this.
man, we could talk for hours. I'm telling you, we could talk for hours. But you know what? I want to answer your question really quick.
Okay.
You know what I would love to see
Mhm.
is I would love to see the military put a lot of effort into training us to be civilians again when we're ready to get out. Because I feel like that's where a lot of the problems is. They train us to be soldiers, but then they let us loose. And you're finally starting to see it with a lot of veterans or a lot of soldiers when they're coming out. They're now starting to get briefed on disabilities they could have, and they're actually doing claims for these soldiers before they get out. And I think that's huge. I think that's a great step.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely great. I remember when I first got back from Iraq, I had we had this thing where we were like 30 soldiers in a room, and we were just next to each other, like in cheers. And they said, and the sergeant walked in and said, is anyone in here crazy? You have mental health problems? And that was our psychological screening before we went back into
Yeah, right.
So I said,
and then they'll tell you, if you say anything, you're stuck on this base for another 6 months.
You got it. You've been
there.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. We have to move on to our next segment, but we are going to definitely have you back. So it's always a pleasure, always an honor having you on. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so good seeing you again.
Oh, yes. And then, hold on. We have a very, very important show coming up. We have Jose Vasquez, and he is a U.S. Army veteran and executive director for Common Defense. So stay with us. He's up next.
Information and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally. Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered in market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam.
I'm Ken Jennings. All of us here at Jeopardy want to thank you for your service to our nation. We truly honor and appreciate you, and what's more, we're looking for contestants like you to play on our show. So head to Jeopardy.com now and take the Anytime test, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon right here on the Alex Trebek stage.
Social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618. Market, advertise, and sponsor your business with Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelly and America's Heroes Group, where information and resources are intentionally disseminated via radio, print, and social media. Call our office for more details at 312-803-2618.
Welcome back. Welcome back to America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. Uh, September is National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. Reach out to those loved ones that are struggling, and especially our veterans who have a higher suicide rate than the general population. Make sure you interact with them and make sure they know that they are valued. And this is also Hispanic Heritage Month. Make sure that you are paying attention to the cultural contributions of the Hispanic population to this nation, which has been greatly enriched by those experiences. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I'm your host, U.S. Army retired Colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon T. Arnold. And we have a special guest with us tonight, and it's Jose Vasquez. Jose is a U.S. Army veteran and executive director for Common Defense. And he's going to be telling us about Common Defense's mission, its programs, its services, and the agenda that it has set for itself. And we are honored to have you on, Jose. I've already been hearing some great things about what you're doing, but I want you to give us an overview of what the organization does and how it's affecting the lives of our veterans.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for having me on, Dr. Arnold. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience tonight. As you said, I'm Jose Vasquez, Executive Director at Common Defense. We are a national organization of veterans. We started back in 2016. I would say in large part in response to the rise of Donald Trump. I live here in New York City, and those of us that founded the organization were also here in New York. So, you know, we got our start back in 2016 and have really grown really rapidly since that time. You may remember back in 2016 that when Trump was running for office, he hosted a fundraiser. He skipped one of the debates and hosted a fundraiser for veterans. And he held the fundraiser, but then when the Washington Post looked into which groups he was donating to, turns out he hadn't donated any of the resources to any veterans organization. So that was an opportunity for us to hold his, campaign's feet to the fire. We held a press conference out in Trump Tower here in New York City. There was about 15 veterans that were there, and probably twice as many cameras. So we knew we had touched a nerve with the national press, and we're able to put a lot of vets on, many of the talking head shows during that period of time. And we definitely got their attention because Trump started talking about us at his rallies and saying, we were supposedly sent by Hillary Clinton, which we were not. We had no connection to the Hillary Clinton campaign at that time. It was just a grassroots movement of veterans. And initially we were organizing just under a hashtag on social media, Vets versus Hate, really trying to push back against some of the hate speech that he was spewing on the campaign trail. And, have since grown to 40,000 members, veteran members across the country. We've got, over 300,000, probably close to 400,000 folks on our email list now. Many of whom are military family folks, veterans, and we're growing like wildfire. Started with 3 vets here in New York City, and now we have up to 30 staff, over 30 staff now. So it's really growing rapidly, and I think what we're trying to do here is build a political home for vets, who share our values, and we work on important issues like foreign policy. We want to protect our democracy, make sure that everybody has the right to vote and access to the ballot. And recently, we took on the issue of climate, getting veterans involved with the huge problem of climate change and how we can prepare our communities for climate mitigation projects. So that's the short version. A lot more to say about that, but yeah, Common Defense is a relatively young organization, and I would say that we're very eager to connect with our veteran sisters and brothers out there, whether you're in an organization or not.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And, I'm hoping my wife is listening because your English is so perfect. You're in New York. I'm from New York originally, and I'm sitting in Chicago, and I've been trying to tell them, there, but, we have a better way of speaking, but it doesn't go over that well over here. But,
Right.
but really fantastic work you're doing. And that's an awesome accomplishment, 40,000 members and 400,000 on a mailing list. I mean, that is a sizable organization. And we know we're a nonpartisan radio station, but one thing I can't stand is anyone attacking a Gold Star family, a service member who was a prisoner of war, um, denigrating the very basis of why we served, and who we are as, and we have so many heroes, that lost their lives for this nation. And that's something I can never get past. And it's not a very nonpartisan way. That's just the way I feel about anyone who would denigrate our service members.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, and I think that that kind of speech against folks who served our nation in uniform and in many cases risked life and limb or didn't come home. I think anybody across the political spectrum, whether you're Republican, Independent, Democrat, what have you, I think up until recently, the norm was you respect people if they served in the military, and regardless of how they vote. I think that we have an amazing experiment that we've been running here for close to 250 years of having a constitutional republic and democratic values that allow people to have their voices heard, and elect who represents them in government. And so I think that, there are some folks who don't appreciate that, or maybe don't fully understand what it means to, either leave your home and go and serve overseas, or even if you didn't go overseas, just putting on that uniform, I think deserves our respect, our honor. And, I think the way politics have been going recently and certain leaders, let's just put it that way. I think we've, some people have forgotten that, certainly not the majority of us.
Yes, yes. And, and one of the things that, that burns in my brain all the time is that, I did a couple of tours in Iraq and then all over the region, but and particularly in Mosul, I was with the Second ID, Striker Brigade. They're out of Washington State, but they were housed in South Korea as their headquarters. But every 3 days, every third day, or fourth day, we were going to a memorial service, for someone who had succumbed to an IED or an RPG and had given their life for the country. And I just can't get to the point of where I would support or agree with anyone that says that they were suckers and losers. It's just disheartening to me.
Yeah.
So it's just something I can't get past. But but what about your service career? What have you been involved with? Or what was your experience?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I come from a family of military service. It looks like my video might be frozen. Is that? Do you see
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my camera off for a sec and then come back on and see if that helps. No, still frozen.
Okay. Yeah, he's having a little bit of a technical difficulty, but he's going to come back in. He's just signing up again. His camera froze a little bit. Yes.
All right. I think we're back.
Much better. Okay.
Little technical glitch there. So yeah, in terms of my service, I come from a military family. My dad's a Vietnam vet, or was a Vietnam vet. He passed away in 2020.
Yes.
But I signed up for, so I'm from New York originally, from Bronx, New York. Was born here, lived in the Bronx until I was 9. Then we moved to California. So I grew up for half of my childhood in the Los Angeles area. Signed up, while I was still a junior in high school, went off, as part of the delayed entry program. 2 weeks after high school graduation in 1992, I was in the Army off to Fort Knox, Kentucky for my
Army. Yep. Go ahead.
That's right. I
had some Marines on earlier, so I just wanted to make sure we.
we got to represent. So I did did, basic and AIT at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then my first duty station was Fort Benning, Georgia. My MOS was 19 Delta, so I was a Cav Scout for the first 4.5 years of my military career. Got lucky after being at Fort Benning for a year. Got stationed at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. So I was in the in the 24th Infantry and then the 25th Infantry Division. Duty in Hawaii is awesome. I was actually just back there recently for my 50th birthday, so was very appreciative of the opportunity to serve in Hawaii. And when you're off duty, you're in Hawaii, so it was pretty great. And then the rest of my time was as a reservist. I served 10 years as a reserve. I switched my MOS from Cav Scout to a medic, so I was a 91 Bravo back then. I think they have changed the code for that more recently, but yeah, back then it was 91 series, and and then was in I was in the 100th Battalion, 442nd Infantry as a reservist. So I was a medic for infantrymen. And then when I got promoted, switched over to Tripler Army Medicals. Yeah, so I was there working in the emergency room during my drill weekends while I was using my GI Bill to go to college in Hawaii. I started college at Leeward Community College, which is right by Pearl Harbor. So I did a year of community college before I moved back to the East Coast, and then spent the rest of my time in various units here in New York City. I was with a combat support hospital out of Fort Totten in Queens. And we also did some drill in at what's it called? It'll come back to me, but it's a reserve unit in Brooklyn. So I was there for a period of time as well. So yeah, all in, I was in the military almost 15 years, and proud of every minute of it.
Oh yes. And people don't realize that, and that's one thing I always say. People are in the military, and some people are there for a year or 3 years, and they say, "Oh, well, I was only in for a year." I said, "But you wore a uniform. You were a target, no matter where you were in the world.
Yeah.
That you were defending the nation, and people knew what you were there for, and what you took an oath to do. So I commend you for your service to the nation and to the people. And what you're doing now is just astounding. I mean, it's something that I think people need to listen to and understand what the common defense really means. That you are really deeply involved with the history making of the country, and making sure that democracy prevails, that people have a place to put their head down. And you were talking about the environmental issues. And, I had a guest on earlier, so it was a national, what they're trying to build is a national independence bank. So it's the fourth attempt, and it's a historical progression from George Washington till now.
Yeah.
And what they were talking about was supporting the infrastructure bills. So there were several things that came out from the current administration, like the PACT Act, but there was one thing that sort of slipped by the media. I think it was really not given justice, was the Inflation Reduction Act, and what its implications were for infrastructure rebuilding. And so veterans need to be involved in that process, with the build out of technology, AI, and construction, and hardening of structures. But we've been, many military members have been trained to really implement those systems and to do that. So they should be a central role in that, play a central role in that. So what's your vision of this whole thing about environmentalism and where we should be?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I think you're 100% right that most people don't fully understand what the Inflation Reduction Act meant. It was kind of the most monumental climate bill that's been passed in decades, and it's a huge investment in infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure we need to be more resilient in the face of impending, climate change and all of the things that we see kind of happening more frequently, right? Big superstorms, fires in places like California and Canada and you name it. Coastal communities that are having to sort of figure out plans for, potentially relocating because the sea level rise is coming up. And so how we got involved in climate work in the first place was we conducted a survey of our members. This is going back a couple years now, but we wanted them to tell us like what are the most important issues that we should be working on as staff. And so working on the elections and protecting our democracy was top of the list. Bringing the troops home from Afghanistan when we still had forces there, and the third one, which to our surprise was climate. A lot of our members are deeply concerned and passionate about that issue, and I think veterans bring a very unique perspective to that because as we know, often with natural disasters, we call out the National Guard. Many National Guardsmen and women have filled sandbags in response to floods and food distribution, and we've got the logistics, the equipment, the know-how, the kind of ability to communicate, across long distances when the grids are down and all of that. And many folks I think are familiar with microgrids. If you've been on a forward operating base, that the military is very self-sufficient and we have everything we need to sustain that forward operating base or any sort of site where we're operating out of. And so those are the kinds of things that I think, or those kind of experiences that vets can bring to the table in terms of educating elected officials about the kind of solutions that veterans want to see. And as you mentioned, veterans are perfect candidates for the kind of green jobs and sort of like whether it's solar panel installation and many other aspects of sort of preparing our communities for climate disasters. Veterans are perfect match, in terms of skill set, experience, folks that have deployed on naval ships to respond to disasters in other countries. We've got, medical skills. So you name it. I think that vets do the kind of things that they've done in the military, I think serve our nation well, even if they're out of uniform. And there's great groups out there like Team Rubicon, right, who have built up a reputation for deploying vets in the face of disaster, and I think that's part and parcel with what veterans can bring to the table when it comes to responding to climate change.
Yes, and that's really one of the common defense. I guess common defense is the name of the organization, but the common defense is not only a foreign mission but a domestic one as well. We take an oath to defend our nations against foreign and domestic enemies, and certainly those things that are impacting people's lives so deeply, like a hurricane or a forest fire or a flood. Definitely are things that we need to defend against if they're going to have a really negative impact on our families and children and the elderly and people with disabilities as well. So that I really have to applaud you for that. And when we're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, I was thinking about it came out in I think it was 18th of August 2022. And there was a meeting that happened in November after that, and it was happening in Egypt, but it was part of the Conference of Parties, 27. And it's like 20 different nations that come together and talk about things like climate change, like, what we're going to be doing. But out of that, they actually made some bold statements. And I think rejoining the climate accord was critical, as was going back to NATO and trying to get nations to start coming to the table to start thinking about these things, because we're seeing more forest fires, we're seeing more intense hurricanes. I mean, it's undeniable right now that something is happening with our climate, and that we're having these deep impacts. And what's really important is that we have the Army Corps of Engineers, for example, thinking about hardening structures and, making sure that we protect these, because if we just simply rebuild the infrastructure we had before, it's going to be decimated again and again and again. We're going to have enormous costs, to the nation, to taxpayers, and that kind of thing. So getting military expertise in early and making sure that we're thinking about rebuilding structures in an appropriate way to face the issue of climate change is essential. I mean, for the economic stability of the country.
Yeah. And the kind of, I sort of talked in broad strokes about the work and the role that veterans can play. To get more specific about what we're involved in specifically, we have a project in Pima County, Arizona. I'm sure it's not a surprise to anybody that Arizona gets lots of sun, and so we're working with community partners to try to get a big kind of solar farm installed and accessing the Inflation Reduction Act dollars. And so part of what our climate team at Common Defense is doing is like educating municipal governments and sort of creating a organized voice of veterans who want to see these kinds of projects come to their communities. Another project that we worked on was in West Virginia. We partnered with a local church that serves a historically Black community in West Virginia, in Charleston, West Virginia. So working with that community to get solar panels installed on the church so that the church can become sort of a hub in the event of things like flooding and other kinds of disasters, right? So that, at least everybody knows, the church can still provide power, people can charge their phones, they can do food distribution. And so that's the kind of, projects that the team is working on. We also have work happening in Pennsylvania, just south of Pittsburgh, working with folks down there to, again, try to get solar projects going and actually get veterans to fill those jobs.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we have about 3 minutes to go. I could spend all night with you, Jose, because what you're saying is just like music to my soul. My background, by the way, is I'm a physician, but I'm an internist, so internal medicine, but I also picked up a second residency in occupational environmental medicine and occupational health and safety, but got a master's of public health, a master's of arts in threat response management, and security studies from the NPS and Naval Postgraduate School. Even though it's Army, they accepted me.
Yeah.
And then the University of Chicago. But I've really been very strongly supportive of doing things in the environmental realm. We have got to get there and start really doing really powerful things in that arena. So I'm going to be reaching out to you because I think you're on a great track. You're doing the right things and have
Appreciate
a
that.
great focus. But yeah, let's tell me, where do people go to find out about your organization? And we have like a couple of minutes to go, but where do they go and how do they get involved with your Common Defense?
Yeah. I mean, the website's pretty simple. It's just commondefense.us. If you are a veteran, you can go to commondefense.us/join, and that'll take you to the join form. We're all over social media. Our handle on almost everything is @commondefense, and so folks can follow us there.
Yeah, can you repeat those again?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So the website is commondefense.us. If you're a vet, you can go to commondefense.us/join to fill out the membership form, or just navigate your way there from the homepage. And then our social media handle is @commondefense. And we welcome anybody who, is currently serving, has served in the military. We got lots of military family members in the organization, or just, concerned citizens who like the work that we're involved in. And, it's worth saying that one of the things we do and we take a lot of pride in is, identifying vets who are interested in becoming leaders in their community. So one of the programs that we run is called the Veterans Organizing Institute. It's a training program, nonpartisan, and we've trained, at this point, hundreds of veterans across the country in our style of community organizing. So we've got we teach vets how to tell their stories, how to talk to the media, how to go to a town hall and speak up. How to do a one-on-one conversation with another vet that you're trying to recruit into whatever cause you're involved in. And it's just been a real blessing, really, to see so many vets come through our doors, get that training, and oftentimes just immediately apply that work. Somebody will come through the training and then say, hey, I spoke at my first school board meeting, or I went to my city council meeting and I identified myself as a vet and told them what I think about whatever is being considered in front of that decision-making body. So that's one, program we do. We also just recently partnered with an organization called Task Force Butler. So what they do is, the shorthand is they call themselves Nazi hunters. So people that are involved in sort of extremist movements, they are holding those people's feet to the fire, trying to make it, not only expose them, but make it costly for them to be involved in that kind of work. And so, we are excited to partner with folks at Task Force Butler. They've got a website as well as taskforcebutler.org. And, we have been collaborating with them on some work recently. So excited to be launching that here on Veterans Day. The last thing I'll say is, there's many vets orgs to join. I think what makes us unique is we very much take seriously the kind of tradition of organizing similar to the civil rights movement or labor struggles in the United States. We are very much about meeting people virtually, but really we're trying to get to know each other in person. So we've got staff in 5 different states: Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Texas.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Jose. We're going to have you back because this is an incredible organization you are leading, and I have loved the work. So you're going to see me, on the line, getting involved and joining your organization too, because I think it's something that we need to be proactive and be part of. Again, America's Heroes Group, we currently have metrics of 8 major cities, and in cities that we're in is 1,152, 72 countries, and YouTube channel is 1,115. And then also podcast downloads, we're over 5.8 million downloads thus far. But we try to cover topics that are important to you and bring people on like Jose Vasquez, who does an incredible job. And we want to make sure that we are engaged as veterans. Again, thank you for our producer and Glenda Smith, and a shout out to all of our media handlers that are taking care of things. Manny, who's in the studio, our board directors, and Glenda Smith. God bless you, and God bless your mom as you're taking care of her. But you are critical to this mission. And thank you for all you do for us as veterans.
Welcome to AHG Connects, where voices, information, and resources are empowered intentionally.